Welcome to my channel. My name is Mark Castro. I'm a licensed real estate broker in the state of California. I've also been practicing property management for over 24 years now. Today's video is in reference to the state of California Department of Consumer Affairs Tenant Landlord Handbook. Now, before we proceed, I must disclose that YouTube is very particular about copyright material, and rightfully so, of course. So, the first piece of disclosure is I did not compose any of this material. This is all public record. This handbook that we're looking at here, or the one that we're reviewing right here, is a handbook that was drafted by or composed by the state of California Department of Consumer Affairs, and we can see that here. And the title of the handbook is California Tenants, a Guide to Residential Tenants and Landlords' Rights and Responsibilities. And we see that here. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, and comment down below. Listen, a lot of effort goes into making these videos. And to be honest with you, the only way that we can continue to put out good, consistent content out there is with your feedback. So hit me up down below. Perhaps you have a question that I haven't answered, or perhaps you do have a question that I've already answered, and I will reply to you and send you a link to a video that was previously made answering your question, or make an entirely new video to help you out. So please subscribe, guys. So listen, this handbook is filled with content. I mean, it really is. Let's look at the amount of pages that it contains. 111 pages. We see that here. And just a number of different subjects. So what we're going to do, if I cover them all in one video, this video will turn into a marathon. So we don't want to do that. So as you see here, what we're going to do is we're going to cover subject by subject. And there will be a series of videos based on just this handbook alone. So in this video, we are going to cover the rental application, and we're going to do some highlights here as we go along. We're going to cover the rental application, the credit check, application screening fees, holding deposits, and the background check. All right, so that's what we're covering in this video. Well, I went a bit too far there. Here we go. I apologize. All right, the rental application. So we're going to keep this simple. Listen, I don't want to provide too much personal opinion that will limit the criticism, but also at the same time, I want this video to be as informative as possible. And, just keep it free from any discrimination, any just personal thoughts or what have you. Let's keep it simple, guys. Let's just keep it simple. Let's go straight to the facts on how property management works, what all the moving components are to this industry, all the requirements, responsibilities, and obligations that each side has. Not only the landlords have an obligation. Now, what is the landlord's ultimate obligation or responsibility? Well, the landlord's ultimate responsibility is habitability. That pretty much sums it up. Habitability is just, the overall responsibility that the landlord has for a tenant, period. Now, of course, that's just like a broad spectrum of responsibilities, if you will. But in general, habitability. Now, the responsibility of a tenant is 1, pay the rent. 2, take care of the place. But before we get to all that, let's dive into the application. So here we go, the rental application. Okay, so before renting to you, most landlords will ask you to fill out a written rental application form. Now, why do they need to ask you for that? Well, it's very simple. Listen, the landlord needs to be able to run a background check. And in order to do that, they need to be able to demonstrate to the credit bureaus that you have granted permission and disclosure over your personal history, the way that you pay your bills, everything that has to do with your credit report, how many collections you have, how many open accounts you have, how many satisfactory accounts you have, how many derogatories you have on there, and other public information like unlawful detainers. That would be one of them. Any type of litigation that's public record would go on there. Bankruptcies, divorce, and a number of other things. So let's proceed. A rental application is different from a rental agreement. Some folks feel like, well, you know what? I already applied for the place, so I must be getting the place. Well, no, not necessarily. Screening is entirely different from a rental agreement. A rental agreement is a commitment where it's a bilateral commitment where both sides are committing to terms, mutual terms on, the property that you're set to rent. For example, the landlord is stating, I am renting my property over to you. I'm the owner, and I'm allowing you to reside on my premises in exchange for compensation. You're going to pay me rent, and you get to live in my property for a specified period of time. And the rental agreement will also outline your obligations as a tenant, your obligations to pay rent, the amount of rent that is to be paid, when the rent is to be paid, and numerous other terms, such as how to handle repairs and any disputes. But before I go off topic, we're just gonna come back to the topic that we have here before us, which is the rental agreement. So the rental application is different. Here we go. Is different from a rental agreement. All right. Then it says on here, the rental application is like a job or credit application. Why? Because that's exactly what it is. You're applying for credit to a degree. And what is the credit? Well, the credit is you're borrowing somebody else's property. If you're a tenant, you're borrowing someone else's property. So the landlord wants to make sure that their risk is minimal in allowing you to basically take over control, because that's what you're going to have, is ultimate control over the property. That's the greatest leverage that a tenant can have. In fact, in landlord-tenant law, it is said to, it's known that the one that has the greatest leverage is the tenant. Why the tenant? Because the tenant has control over the property. And let's not forget, and here we go, the landlord will use the rental application to decide whether or not he or she is going to rent to you. So it's very important. Now, why do I mention that? And that is because numerous applicants, they have this misconception that, they are simply going to apply for a place and they are going to automatically get it. And God knows how many phone calls I've received where prospects call me and say, well, I don't want to apply because, I've applied to numerous places and they just take my money and no one wants to rent to me. I'm like, okay, well, we can't discuss this any further until I'm able to verify your information, because I don't know you. And we use third-party sources. We use the credit bureaus to be able to verify how you pay your bills. That's really what we're after. The only thing, the only purpose of screening is to be able to mitigate the risk of the landlord and to be able to more or less make a determination as to your ability to pay. That is it. We're not looking for anything else other than that. We are looking for the prospective tenant's ability to pay and the probability or the chances that the tenant isn't able to pay and goes into default. That is all that we're looking for in all the background reports. Now, I also receive comments from numerous prospective tenants that say, well, what type of information are you going to ask for? Man, you guys really ask for a lot of information. Wait. You want my what? You want my ID, my social? You want to know about my income? You want to know where I work? Wait, you want to know how many places I've lived in previously? And you want to know about banking? Yeah, well, that's only on 1099. On 1099 applicants, not on W-2 applicants. On W-2 applicants, all we verify is the W-2 information, and we contact the landlord. But in any event, let's go over some of the information that will be asked of you. Okay, here we go. A rental application usually asks for the following information. And we want to highlight this so that you're able to follow along. The application is going to ask you for the name, address, telephone number of the current and past employer. Why? We need to be able to verify how much you earn in order to determine whether or not you qualify or you have the income to be able to pay the rent. We need to be able to verify your income. Now, if you're self-employed, we're going to ask you for bank statements, and we're also going to ask you for your most recent tax returns. But as you know, for most W-2 employees, I don't know why I said most, in fact all, we are going to verify with your employer. So we're going to ask for the name, address, telephone number of your current and past employers, because we want to see how much experience you have in your industry. Perhaps you're going from being a security guard to being a receptionist, and you've been a wonderful security guard for 2 decades now, and you just promoted yourself through education, personal development. You just promoted yourself into an office job, and you just you don't have all the experience yet. So we need to be able to determine whether or not the likelihood that you're going to lose your job. Now, we don't pay too much focus into that. For the most part, your credit report will speak a lot of you. So if you have an immaculate credit report, your employment isn't as important. Why not? Because habits matter more than your current circumstance. And they really do. For example, if you're an individual that will pay their bills no matter what, we know that you're going to figure out a way to pay your rent and that you're going to be responsible. So for the most part, credit will speak more volumes than your employment. Now, your employment, we just want to be able to verify. What if you're entirely unemployed and you're telling me that you're earning $5,000 a month? And I need to at least be able to verify that. You know what I mean? So let's move on. The name, address, telephone number of your current and past landlords. Now, this is very important, because what this is going to tell us is the landlord wants to know how you, the tenant, or the prospective tenant, or the applicant, how you are or how you will be as a tenant with us. Listen, we all have habits, and history tends to repeat itself. Now, that's a fair yet unfair statement, because, a number of us out there we look into, we like to improve. We like to, see progress, and we like to better ourselves. So our past shouldn't necessarily, it doesn't necessarily define who we are as individuals, but our past does it does give an indication of more or less who the individual, who the applicant is, and what their habits are. You're also able to demonstrate a pattern of change. For example, you've simply escalated up the ranks at your place of employment. Another thing that we might be able to learn from your background screening is that you've moved from a place that is, let's say, in the ghetto, and you've moved to other more desirable areas, and that speaks volumes. But in any event, look, what we're really looking for when we contact the landlord is, one, ability to pay. Two, we want to know if you're a good tenant. If you're applying to live at one of our buildings, and we have large buildings, chances are that you're gonna have neighbors. Hence it's kind of like rhetorical to say large building and not have any neighbors, right? But chances are you're going to have neighbors. And we need to be careful about what type of applicants or prospective tenants we put into these buildings. Why? Because it affects the overall flow. For example, we need to be able to screen for sex offenders, because we're responsible for the safety of the general public. All of our tenants are members of the general public, and we're responsible for that. And we need to be able to verify if you're a tenant that perhaps engages in illegal activity, and your landlord will be able to tell us that. Your current and previous landlord will be able to tell us whether or not you were selling drugs in the unit. Perhaps you just love playing loud music in the middle of the night, at 2 o'clock in the morning. And, that's not very productive for anyone. It causes just a lot of headaches and a lot of issues for not only the surrounding neighbors who are members of the public, but also for the property manager, the property management company, and the landlord. So we need to be able to verify the name, address, telephone number of your current and past landlord who you want to use as reference. Now, this is pretty interesting because you might say, well, what does that have to do with anything? I get it, Mark. Okay, you're going to verify employment. You're going to verify with my current and previous landlord. But what do you need references for? Like, what kind of information do you expect to get out of these? Well, for one, we are reviewing and we're going to go back to this so that you're able to notice it out here. This isn't something that I'm making up, okay? So we are currently reviewing the State of California Department of Consumer Affairs Tenant Landlord Handbook. So I'm not making these requirements up, guys. I'm simply disclosing them. I'm sharing, just vital content with you. And it is what it is. The application will ask you for, and I'm pressing too much on the screen here, I apologize. We'll ask you for the name, address, telephone number of the people you use as references, and that is so that we can ask them some personal questions about you. And they are only going to be questions pertaining to the application. We're not going to ask what kind of coffee you like, who you hang out with, what your Facebook page is like. We're not going to ask for any of that. We can only ask for information that is being asked of you on the rental application. For example, is John Doe or Jane Doe working? We're also going to ask, where does she work? I mean, you might tell us you work at McDonald's, but you actually you don't work at all. You know what I mean? So, yeah, we're going to ask a few questions, but they're all going to be along the line. The questions that are already on the application and nothing separate from that. Other questions that we're going to ask on the application are your social security number. We need this information. You can't run a credit report without a social security number. That is your identification number. We're also going to ask for your driver's license number. Why? Because, we need that to provide two proofs of identification when we submit a request for screening. We may or may not ask you about your bank accounts. Now you might say, well, wait a minute, Mark, you just said you may or may not ask, but yet you're showing me something on here on the screen that says we're going to ask for your bank account. Not necessarily. The bank account information is used for 1099 applicants. Who are the 1099 applicants? The self-employed applicants. The plumbers, electrician, the housekeeper, the accountant, anyone that is an independent contractor or is self-employed and doesn't receive a W-2 from an employer. If you are an independent contractor and you don't have a traditional job per se, you don't have employment, then you will be required to submit at least 3 months worth of bank statements, because we need to be able to arrive at your income. We need to arrive at an average income, at an average monthly income. So we're going to ask for that. And then also your credit account number for credit card references. And that is to be able to identify you. Look, we've already asked for your social, your driver's license, but keep in mind that there is a lot of identity theft out there. Okay? and we're not a government agency, and we're not, the INS or immigration or what have you. So look, I have no way of knowing if your social security number belongs to you or your driver's license. And the only way we can be able to completely verify all the information that we receive is we need this and this. We need your social security and your driver's license to even be able to submit a request for a background check. And of course, a release of claim, which only comes through the form of an application. So if you don't sign the application at the very bottom of the application, then we don't have your permission to obtain your information, your background. So we need that. We need your social, your driver's license, and the ultimate way to verify that the information we are receiving is yours and not of someone else is matching what you provide. For example, this is my Citibank credit card. This is my what's one of the other ones? American Express credit card. And we match the information that you provided with the information that we receive from the credit bureaus, because the credit bureaus don't even know who you are. All they receive is an application from us, the application that you submitted, and we send it over to them with all the information, and they send us a report. But again, the only way to verify that is with this here. So listen, as we continue reading this handbook, we're gonna go over some of the stuff that I've already stated previously, and that is that it says on here, the application may also contain authorization for the landlord to obtain a copy of your credit report. That's already on here. And I'm sorry, but I got to read it before I highlight it, because I'm using an iPad, and as I highlight, I can't see the content, and I'm not able to read it. So because I'm highlighting, I'm covering up the words. So that's the reason why you see the highlight after I read it. So let me read it again. And it says, the application also may contain an authorization for the landlord to obtain a copy of your credit report. It says on here, it might contain or it may contain. The truth is they all contain it. What's an application without a release? It's worthless. It's worthless. So we need a release at the end of the day. All right. But look, let's go on. It says on here, which will show the landlord how you handle your financial obligations in the past. Okay? How you handled your financial obligations in the past. And I'm going to highlight this. Well, I'm sorry, I already highlighted it. I'm going to underline it. Underline it. And here we go. It says on here, which will show the landlord how you handled your financial obligations in the past. Now, this right here, my friends, already addresses or corroborates or verifies all the previous comments I've made. This is why we're running a credit report. We simply want to know how you handle, and let me remove that so I show it to you here again. And let me do another highlight. We are only after some general information, and we simply want to know how you handle your financial obligations. It's very simple. There's no discrimination over running a credit report of on a prospective tenant or an applicant. Bottom line, that is the only information we are after. We want to know how you handle your financial obligation, how you pay your bills. Do you ignore your bills? I mean, look, in the event that you were to default because, I don't know, maybe you lose your job or what have you, in the event that you default, I want to know if you're going to pay me. And that's really what it boils down to. That's the only reason why we need to run a credit report. I'm surprised at the number of phone calls that I receive where whenever, we mention we're going to run a background, the prospects just they respond and act like if this is alien, like if this stuff is unheard of, like this practice is unheard of. It's like, you're gonna do what? You're gonna run a credit report? You're gonna run a background on me? Yeah. I don't know you, and I believe you. I want to believe you, but I need to be able to verify. And all I'm after is, just being able to confirm how you handle or how you've handled your financial obligations in the past. And the reason why I say what you handle instead of just in past tense how you handled is because in reality, much of the time we do change. We change for the better. But then there are some folks out there that are just very habitual and never change. But nevertheless, we can't use this statement just simply in past tense, because it's all about verifying how you've handled your financial obligations in the past, but also how you currently handle your current financial obligations now. The landlord may also ask you what kind of job you have. Of course, we need to know. Look, it's very important. The landlord doesn't care if you're a security guard. The landlord doesn't care if you push carts at the market. The landlord doesn't care if you work at a high rise, 50 stories up. If you have an office at a high rise. Look, at the end of the day, what the landlord wants to be able to verify is what is the likelihood of you being terminated or laid off. Do you have a seasonal job? Maybe you're currently employed, but you picked up a job for 3 months and you apply for a rental unit, or you apply for one of my rental units, and you tell me that you simply don't disclose all the information. You're not lying to me, but you're not disclosing all the information, and you tell me, look, Mark, I'm employed, man. And sure, by all means, sure enough, you're not lying, you're employed. But you fail to tell me that you picked up a seasonal job, you picked up a summer job, you picked up a job, an additional job, or you secured additional employment during the holiday season, during Christmas. So it says on here, the landlord may ask you what kind of job you have, and your monthly income, and other information that shows the ability to pay rent. So here we go back again on that, okay? Let's repeat some of this. The landlord may ask you what kind of a job you have. We already got that, right? Here we go. Your monthly income, because that's really what's important here, okay? The ability to pay, okay? And then it says on here, and other information that shows your ability to pay rent. That's what we're after. It's very plain and simple. There's no science here. There's no discrimination when a landlord asks for your credit information. They ask you to submit an application and they want to run a background on you. They're not discriminating. They're simply doing their due diligence. They want to know how you've handled your financial obligations in the past and how you handle your financial obligations currently, and your overall ability to pay rent. Now, let's keep in mind, it's illegal for the landlord to discriminate, okay? And they can't harass you. They can't ask you about race, color, religion, sex, sexual orientation, marital status, national origin, ancestry, familial status, sources of income. Okay, so it talks about sources of income, but I had to make a mistake here. Look, when it talks about sources of income, if we look over here, I apologize, but here we go. If we look over here, it talks about that the landlord is allowed to ask what kind of a job you have. So what is it talking about here? Well, very simple. Right there, it's talking about you cannot discriminate. The landlord cannot discriminate over your source of income. Not that the landlord cannot ask about your source of income, but rather cannot discriminate over your source of income. For example, you're a security guard, and the landlord might feel that is beneath anyone to be a security guard. Maybe you push carts at the local grocery store, and the landlord might feel, well, you know what? This tenant isn't worthy of living at my property. Well, that's discrimination. That's illegal. So the law says the landlord cannot discriminate over your source of income. Okay? As long as your source of income is a legal source of income, you're not out there slanging dope, You're not out there, just, committing illegal acts. But as long as your sources of income are legal, then the landlord can't discriminate, period. Regardless whether you pick up trash or you whatever it is that you may do. The landlord cannot discriminate over your source of income. Okay? And especially not over disability. All right? So listen, I can't read this entire handbook word for word, because otherwise, again, we're going to turn this into a marathon. So we're only going to go over key subjects on here. But if you support the channel, you subscribe, you like, and you submit some comments down below, I guarantee you I will respond to your comments. Especially if you have concerns, I will respond to your comments. And if you need any further information, or you simply want a copy of this handbook, I'll send it over to you. I'll provide you with my email. But show me some love and subscribe. In any event, let's continue with the topic at hand here. It says on here that the landlord may not ask about your immigration or citizenship status. This is a big one in California. Okay. And we're going to move further along here and go into the landlord may ask you the number of people who will be living in the unit with you. So, they need to be able to prevent overcrowding. At the end of the day, that's really what this is about. Being able to determine occupancy limits and prevent, and here it is, prevent overcrowding of the rental unit. Bottom line. This is a big one. Okay. And nowadays with the ridiculous high rents, there's a lot of overcrowding. I mean, it's just becoming a trend. And, unfortunately, we are going to ask you about how many people are going to live in the unit. Okay. It says it very clear on here. Ask you about the number of people. Okay. Whoa, what happened? Okay. Ask you about. Seriously? Maybe it's time for a new iPad. All right, once again. So here we go. I don't know what's going on, but I'm going to try one more time, and it's just not working. All right, so let's move on to the next step, and that is the credit check. All right, so the landlord or the landlord's agent will probably use your rental application to check your credit history and past landlord-tenant relationships or relations. Okay, let me highlight it. All right. The landlord may obtain your credit report from a credit reporting agency to help him or her decide whether to rent to you. At the end of the day, just because you completed an application does not mean you automatically qualify. Okay, there's still a screening process, and you must qualify. If you don't qualify, you don't qualify. I mean, now there are numerous landlords out there that are very flexible. I'm one of them. And, we also work with co-signers and third party for the subsidized the subsidized programs. In any event, the landlord, here we go. Let's read it again. It says the landlord may obtain the credit report from a credit reporting agency to help him or her determine whether or not to rent to you. Okay. Credit reporting agencies or the credit bureaus keep record of people's credit history. Once again, credit reporting agencies or the credit bureaus keep records of the people's credit history. We're going to highlight it now. Called credit reports. Okay. Credit reports state whether a person has been reported as being as paying late on their bills. Okay, as being late in paying their bills. Credit reports state whether a person has been reported as being late in paying their bills. This is what we are after, this type of information. We want to know how you pay your bills. What is the likelihood that you are going to skip on rent or simply not pay because of inability to pay? There's numerous reasons why you won't pay the rent. It's not always because you don't want to pay the rent. Sometimes it's because you can't keep a job. Other times is because you're promoted, you receive a bonus, and you go on a shopping spree because you just, you know, don't. I mean, you're not very responsible. Now, this isn't for not everyone out there that is applying for rental property is irresponsible. We are, this video is to focus on why we do the screening. This isn't for the perfect applicant. Look, listen, if you have if you have perfect credit, you have a great job, you're very stable, you've been at your job for 20 years, seriously, you don't need to watch this video. This video is for those that have questions and say, well, why am I being turned down everywhere? Why are they looking at how long I've been at my job? Why does the landlord want to know how much I earn? Why does the landlord want to know where I work? Why does the landlord want to speak to my current or previous landlord? Why does the landlord want to speak to my references? Why is the landlord going to run a credit background or a credit report? Look, if you have perfect credit, a great job, you're stable, chances are you're not going to question any of this. Why? Because you live by a higher standard. So you're already used to this. You probably have numerous credit cards, all in great standing. You already know that anybody that extends credit over to you, whether you're acquiring a home, you're acquiring a vehicle, you're buying appliances, you're buying furniture on credit, they're gonna run your credit report. Okay, this isn't like like rocket science, really. So everyone's going to run your credit report at the end of the day. When a landlord doesn't run your credit report, that landlord is setting themselves up for failure. I mean, you might as well just, rent based on a handshake, and your lease agreement might as well be on a napkin, because it's just a relationship that's it's just being set up for failure. And you know what? Let's talk about that, because in reality, look, I didn't make that statement because I'm simply a landlord advocate. Look, I'm the middle guy. I'm not an advocate for the landlord, and I'm not just an advocate for the tenant. I'm smack in the middle. I'm a licensed real estate broker and a practicing property manager, and I sit smack in the middle. I have to be that mediator between the landlord and the tenant. So when I make that kind of a statement that the landlord that doesn't run a background check is simply setting itself for failure, it's because not only they're setting themselves for failure, because of the fact that they might rent to someone that is a high risk, or the likelihood that that applicant will go into default. But look, at the end of the day, in property management, we are dealing with people's lives here, man. And a landlord that doesn't perform a credit check or a background check is really not only doing a disservice to themselves because they're not mitigating risk, they're really doing a disservice to the tenant. You're gonna be like, wait a minute, how are they doing a disservice to the tenant if the landlord decides not to run a credit check or not to run a background check? It's very simple. When that landlord rents to a high risk tenant, and the tenant inevitably defaults, that landlord is going to be faced with the obligation to perhaps evict if they intend on recovering the property. Unless they're a charity and they decide, hey, you know what? Screw this. The tenant can live on there indefinitely without paying rent. But since I highly doubt that, then that landlord is doing a disservice to the tenant because they're setting up that tenant for failure. And you're going to be like, well, where does personal responsibility come into play? Why is the landlord being blamed for setting up the prospective tenant, setting them up for failure? It's very simple. Because look, it doesn't take rocket science to figure out that most of us, or most of population out there, most of the population likes to get into situations that they can't afford. They like to buy things they can't afford. Most of the population likes to, for example, and this is, based on 22 years of experience, this isn't speaking for those that have excellent credit, a great job, and stability, and are stable at work. Look, at the end of the day, most people have bad credit. Okay. Bottom line, most people have bad credit, and that is because they have terrible habits. Okay, we get into all kinds of mess. We try to get things that we can't afford based on impulse. So when a landlord doesn't do a background check, the landlord is doing that prospective tenant a disservice, because you are playing into their impulse. That landlord is playing into that prospective tenant's impulse to be able to get into a place that they can't afford, or that they shouldn't be getting in, or entering into an agreement they shouldn't be entering into. So when a landlord doesn't perform a background, the landlord is not only doing a disservice to the landlord himself or herself or themselves. They're not doing a service to themselves, but that landlord is also not doing a service to the prospective tenant that can't afford to live at your property. Look again, guys. So if you want this handbook, subscribe, like, comment down below. Shoot me a comment, where you want me to, to send you a copy of this handbook. And I will respond. I'll send you my email, and I'll send you the handbook. But let's move on, because I can't cover everything on here. Again, this is going to turn into a marathon. So application fees. Let's go down to this. Look, at the end of the day, landlords aren't allowed to make they're not allowed to make a profit on credit reports. Credit reports are simply for determining whether or not a prospective tenant is of high risk, and at the end of the day, just check whether or not what the prospective tenant's ability to pay is. So here we go. When you submit a rental application, the landlord may charge for an application screening fee. Okay. Now this hasn't been updated for many years, but a lot of the content or the information contained within this handbook is very, very accurate. But in 2009, landlords may charge up to $42.06. As of 2020, that number has increased to $50, roughly. It's about like $49.95 or so, but rounding it up, roughly 50. But if a credit report, if you contact a prospective landlord, and they tell you that the credit check is 45, 35, they're within the limit. They're within the limit, guys. So just wanted to let you know that, they simply can't make up, how much to charge you. Okay. There is, there are laws for this. There's legislation. And, that's an entire topic in and of itself. So we're not going to go into it. We're just going to keep it simple. And then a holding deposit. Property management. In property management, the product is the unit. So if you apply for a place and you require a week or two to move in, the management company or the landlord will very likely ask you for a holding deposit. It's a commitment deposit. This deposit is, let me see what it says on here. Some tenants, it says sometimes the tenants and the landlord will agree that the tenant will rent the unit, but the tenant cannot move in immediately. Okay. So if you can't move in immediately, you're going to tie up a unit. And in many cases, look, we don't want you to back out. If we ask you for a small holding deposit, for example, equivalent to $20, $50, and you have a change of heart because in your search for a new home, you've looked at 20 different locations and you narrowed it down to the top 5 or maybe even the top 3. Now, one of the places that you toured has a pool, and maybe my place doesn't. Maybe the other location that you looked at is at a high rise, and mine is at ground level. One of them comes with a view and the other doesn't. And you apply to both. And you're like, look, I know I probably won't get that one at the high rise, but just in case, I'm going to apply at this other one also. I'm going to leave a $20 or $50 deposit. And if I don't get it, I can walk away from that $20 or $50. I'll take the hit. I'll take the loss. And that's the reason why the holding deposit or the commitment deposit, has to be of a considerable amount. I usually ask for $500 because I know you will consider walking away from $500. I know that I don't know too many people that are willing, able, or ready to just walk away from $500. So at least not just by touring a property. That doesn't mean that you don't have the funds to incur a $500 loss, but I doubt you're simply going to go look at a place, commit to tying it up because you've applied and I'm not only spent on a application fee, but also a holding deposit. Listen, with 4 adults at about $45, that's $105. Okay, I'm sorry, 4 adults. That's that's $150. So, no, I got it entirely wrong. 135 for 3. Yeah. So let's go based on the 3 adult scenario. I apologize. It's been a long day. $45 per app or per adult. Times 3 adults equals $135 just on screening alone. And then you have a $500 holding deposit, or commitment. Or commitment deposit. So listen, at this point, you've already invested 500 plus 135, and that is 635. That's a lot of money just for looking at a property, especially if you back out, just for looking at a property. Now, if you do decide to move in, then this is an expense, and it's an expense from the very beginning because it has to do with the screening. But this here, you don't lose it. It gets applied towards your move-in. So if your move-in cost is $1,500 deposit and $1,500 first month for a total of $3,000, your balance is $2,500. You don't lose it. You don't lose it. You now have a credit because you decided to fulfill your commitment to move in to the unit. Okay? So I hope this video was very helpful. Unlawful detainers, that's a basic one. This is, those are evictions. But I have another video entirely for that. This is a very complex topic, and I can't do it justice in a minute or two. So this will be covered in another video. But thank you for watching. Please subscribe, like, share, and comment down below so that I continue to bring you, just valuable content on a consistent basis. And again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.